Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in day about Kagurabachi, chapter number 97. This chapter is titled Vessel. And guys, we have officially had a moment in the Glowplasma recording history that has never actually happened before. And that is, I actually have to fully re-record an entire video from start to finish. Sometimes I've sort of sat down, recorded a video, being like, hey, this isn't really worth my time. I don't like how this video is going so far. So halfway through, I'll stop and then start a new instance of the video, re-record up to that point, and then just continue on with the rest of whatever manga chapter I'm talking about, or really whatever I'm talking about in general. But never have I ever recorded a video before, sat down, done all of my talking about it. Like, I had a whole 26-minute video in this chapter of Kagurabachi that you guys will never hear, simply because I have been messing with a lot of OBS settings. I've been figuring out better ways to record, how to make my audio louder so it doesn't have to be something I have to jack up later in post, and really I've just been messing with a lot of various settings along with the microphones that I've been using recently and the interface box I've been using as well, downloading software on my computer, and really just messing with a lot of different audio properties on my end of the whole idea of hey, I want to have good audio whenever I'm making these YouTube videos, and sort of that's what I've been trying to do, you know what I'm saying? But either way, in OBS there's a property that pretty much makes it so whatever I am recording doesn't actually record, and for some reason I had that on, and for some reason that's where we are now in the sort of state of the world where, oh damn, that sort of sucks pretty much. But either way, today I'm here to talk about Kagurabachi chapter number 97. This is just a really good chapter from start to finish, really giving us a lot of in-depth pretty much ideas on hey, this is how the whole force field around the Kagurabachi HQ works, and tying that in with the main story of, hey, Chihiro and Samura currently can't get into the HQ because they are being repelled. Because maybe, or maybe not, there are two pretty much vessels that are containing the force field instead of one right now. That's pretty weird, you know what I'm saying? That's pretty much what this entire chapter is about. This chapter has a really cool cover page, which is hey, I love whenever manga does cover pages, because it sort of means that hey, the author realizes I don't have to use all 19 of these pages for my manga chapter this week, so let's just make this really cool illustration and artwork. Really, one of my favorite to ever do this was Atsushi Okubo in his manga Fire Force. Later on in that series, he really had a cover page for each chapter, and it was just a cool thing, Fire Force at the top, and just a really fun, weird, wacky illustration that Okubo would draw of Shinra, or really whichever of the Fire Force cast he was focusing on. It was just a really cool way to portray sort of opening up a chapter, and you can always tell hey, this is the art style that Fire Force is going for. And here in the same moment, we just have this really cool image of Izami's left eye, of course the one that you can almost always see for the main fact of hey, his right eye is covered by that little tuft of hair that he always has going on there, and reflected in his eye you can almost see the Shinuchi. I say you can almost see, you can clearly see the Shinuchi just being reflected back through it, which is just man, it's just a really cool page, you know what I'm talking about? But of course, we're going to talk about this chapter of Kagurabachi, chapter number 97. We first need to talk about what happened last time in Kagurabachi. And of course, that was a chapter really focused on, hey, Izami is here getting ready to beat the ever-loving crap out of Yura. And you know what he did? He did that, right? Use his sorcery that we now know has an ability called Coin to pretty much go through and pretty much magnetize these coins, pretty much messing with the muscles and tendons within Yura's body, almost seizing and locking him up. We learned a little bit about Izami's past and the whole idea of hey, you know Izami? Well, he comes from a doctor family, and his doctor family was really good, but Izami said, you know what, I don't want to be part of the family business. I want to kill people. And that was pretty much the entire thing that Izami decided to go off and do, leading us to where we are in the story now. And the very last thing that happened was pretty much, he was completely overwhelming Yura. And he's just hey, you're sure going to be spending time with us down here pretty much, because we're going to beat you up. And that's where we ended last chapter of Kagurabachi. Well, we start off this chapter, again, chapter number 97, titled Vessel, off in a little bit of a different spot, as pretty much we just get some narration coming from, as we will learn, one of the vessels of the Kagurabachi HQ, who pretty much creates the force field, mainly the main, sensory sorcerer that we have seen thus far in Kagurabachi, right? as pretty much he just gives us some narration saying, the Kabanabi headquarters is surrounded by a force field who repels anyone who isn't part of the Kabanabi. That strong, immense force field derives from natural forces. The magic inscriptions covering the enormous subterranean edifice convert the Earth's heat into spirit energy, supplying the building's interior. Spirit energy is life force. It must be associated with a human and channeled through a person's will to become sorcery. Spirit energy that belongs to no one can't be wielded. In other words, this vast spirit energy intrinsically is beyond human control. Spirit energy with nowhere to go simply fizzles. And we just get a bunch of these images like, hey, here's the Kabanabi HQ, of course, under the mainland of Tokyo. We see it's got all this, like, runic writing that turns the heat into spirit energy, all of this various stuff. Until we eventually just get the whole idea of the vessel being like, oh, and that's where I come in, right? And of course, this is the main sensory guy who stands on the pillow and pretty much can tell everything happening within the Kabanabi HQ's force field, right? The person at the force field's core is selected once every 10 years from a very small pool of candidates. If they complete a decade of service, they're promised enough compensation for a life of leisure thereafter. But first, the person's body must be reconstructed. As we just see an image of this person's mouth being open and a small little scroll being thrown inside their mouth. And as we'll learn later, this scroll has the inscription realms upon realms inscribed upon it, right? But pretty much we just get this whole idea that the vessel must swallow this scroll, and then roughly for 4 months, they drift into liminal space between life and death. They lose a number of organs and all of their reproductive functions. That tremendous energy has nowhere to escape, and their body becomes its vector, transforming it into the force field. Their presence alone is what makes the powerful force field possible. They uphold the force field's core, and the 6 others close by provide auxiliary support. As of course, as we get all this narration, we get reminded that, hey, down here in this main little hut where the sensory vessel is pretty much, of course there are these 6 people around them, and Izaru currently here in this room pretty much, right? As we pretty much understand that the vessel was pretty much telling Izaru about everything going on currently, and Izaru's like, what do you mean, like the Shinichi's power is being unleashed in this building, right? And he's like, hey, and you're telling me their spirit energies are above all of our reinforcements pretty much, right? Like, why don't they just come straight down here and take you out pretty much, right? As we just see the vessel just ends up saying like, hey, communications are cut off too. Something must be wrong with the force field. As Izaru looks around in this room and just thinks like, hey, the only ones who could be influencing the force field are the 6 people connected to it in here pretty much, right? He's like, hey, in here has to be another traitor pretty much, right? As he just looks around at all these other sensory guys, and as he's sort of doing all of this, the main sensory guy, the vessel in the middle of the room, just says like, no, it's none of the people in here. As Izaru just says like, hey, but the only people who could really influence the force field are you guys in here. What do you mean it's not one of you, right? As the sensory guy just says like, hey, there is one other. There is another vessel just like me. And on that point, we now cut away from these guys here for a minute. We will be back to them later. As we now cut upstairs to the room where currently Hakuri, Kiri, and Ichiki are in currently, along with Kasid, who is currently, like, blood smeared on the wall, pretty much, right? As the announcement just comes over the loudspeakers of the Kabanabi HQ, pretty much saying, like, hey, attention, everyone. This message will be short and not repeated. There is one more vessel in this building. And of course, Hawker's all freaked out, like, vessel? Like, what is he talking about, right? And he looks over to Ichiki, who briefly explains the whole idea of, like, hey, the linchpin of the headquarters who controls the force field within their own body. Normally, there is just one. But could there be one more? And Ichiki thinks that last part of that sentence to himself and does not say it out loud, right? But downstairs, we see that Izaru is the one who's yelling this into the loudspeaker pretty much, as he just says like, hey, that person must have overwritten the force field's parameters, as a result we're able to summon reinforcements. As, of course, here in the moment, Ichi's like, wait a second, is he talking about the backup? In addition to our current vessel that mediates the force field, the device needed to cultivate a successor was already prepared just in case of unforeseen circumstances. As of course we see there's another Realms Upon Realms scroll that is locked up somewhere in the HQ. And of course Ichi just thinks like, hey, naturally it was heavily guarded, but with Kasen's guidance, it could have easily been swapped out for a fake. As Ichi just thinks like, man, we may as well just have served it up on a silver platter. As Ichi walks over to talk to Kasen a little bit, he then turns to Hakari and Kiri and just is like, hey, Hakari, Kiri, I'm sorry, but I need the two of you back out there in the battle. Our top priority is restoring the force field. With a second vessel in play, the circuit that generates the force field is altered, changing the force field's function. Now, it's only serving to repel those two enchanted blades. This requires drastic measures. With two vessels, the energy is irregular and unstable. The effects are even influencing the building's communication system. But that must have been factored in to their plan. As Ichi's pretty much telling all of this to Hakari and Kiri, we now cut back down to where Izaru and the first vessel are pretty much, right? As the vessel just is like, hey, however, even if this gives them advantage, the price they must pay, as of course he remembers when he had to go through the whole thing after eating the scroll and like his reproduction systems were completely cut off and like all of these things were happening inside of his body, right? And Izaru just says like, hey, in other words, they're fully prepared to do whatever it takes. As we also cut down and we see that somewhere in the building, the Hishaku member that I have been dubbing Dale because we don't know what his name is, but it is the strongest Hishaku member that Yura named a few chapters ago. We just see that he is sitting on the ground, pretty much one of his hands up, leaning on his knee as a few Kabanami members are walking up towards him. He just says, Yura will be king. As you now cut over to where Yura and Izami currently are, pretty much going through, getting ready to duke all of this various stuff out, as we just see that Yura says like, you're gonna wear yourself out fighting like that. And then Izami's like, hey, thank you for your concern, but you should not worry about yourself. You have the Shinuchi, and you can't fend off an unarmed opponent. I'd really be panicking if I was you. As Yura just looks down and sees the image in his mind of the Sword Master standing up off of the ground, he just thinks like, oh, bit by bit, it's coming in to my grasp. As Yura just thinks about the malediction, all of the flowers sprouting out all around the entire area, we see this really cool image of some blood on his pretty much suit jacket, or his collared shirt, really starting to form into the centipede and crawl along down the page. As Yura just says, oh, well, I think I'm ready to live up to your expectations. And as Yura says this, we now turn the page and we see a story panels, or at least that's what I dub them here in Kagurabachi, as we see that Yura leans his head back just a little bit, as he just proclaims, I'll bring order to this nation. As we just see flowers are sprouting out all around Yura's body, along with we see a few centipedes start crawling out of his mouth. That's definitely not weird and slightly psychotic, it's definitely normal, you know what I'm talking about, right? But either way, as Yura proclaims this, we now cut back upstairs to where Ichiki is talking with Kasen, right? Kasen is just laying on the ground proclaiming, oh, just as you said, thanks to the instability of the force field, will succumb in a few minutes. But before that happens, Yura will reach the Sword Master. But of course, Ichiki is acting a little bit of like a calm and collected person here, as he just says, no, all we have to do is to kill your vessel and restore the force field. As of course, downstairs, wherever Yura, Izami, and all of them are all fighting, we just see the room is totally collapsing here in the moment, right? And Izami looks forwards at Yura and just thinks like, hey, if the force field is restored, reinforcements will arrive. We need the enchanted blades to stop him. Of course, thinking the same exact thing that Ichiki is thinking here in the moment, right? As we see that Iruha and Natsuki slowly stand up and get ready to enter the fray once more, as we just see the two of them appear right behind Yura, making this a 3-on-1 once again. As Izami starts to pick up his hands and hold them in a fighting position, he just thinks like, hey, the muscles and bones of both of my arms are completely shredded. The Shinichi's powers are ridiculous, and unfortunately, that's really the limits of what I can do. But pretty soon, it'll get worse, I foresee. But even so, Izami holds both his fists up, clenches them together, blood flying everywhere around his hands pretty much, and his arms that are beaten and bloodied. Izami just holds them up and just says, "But I can still hit you," as he gets ready to go in for an attack, as he just thinks one more thing before we cut away from him. I'll buy us all the time I can. Just get here before I die. As we now cut downstairs once more, where Izaru is talking with, of course, the first vessel. And he says, like, hey, well, can you tell me this? Like, where's the other vessel, pretty much, right? As we just see that the vessel just is like, hey, if he was at headquarters this whole time, I would have noticed him. Which means it's someone who just got here. In other words, as we see in the Kabanabi HQ, the loudspeakers come together once more to proclaim, do not stop killing the Hishaku. Assume that anyone who stands in your way is aligned with the Hishaku. Exterminate the Hishaku as quickly as possible. As we see Kiri and Hakuri running through the halls of the Kabanabi HQ. And the final panel we end this chapter of Kagurabachi on is a really awesome one in my opinion, as we just see the scroll titled Realms Upon Realms sitting here in the middle, and all around them are the 5 other members of the Hishaku who are currently here at the Kabanabi HQ. Of course, we see Hokuto, we see Bingo, we see Uran, we see the tall guy who, of course, worked with Hirohiko, who I have dubbed Talo, and we also see the strongest Hishaku member, Dale, also sitting here in the moment. And that's where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi. Now, this chapter is just awesome from legitimately the opening page all the way to the end. I really love this whole idea of understanding more about the force field and really how to contain it. You need this extreme level of power, which is where these scrolls pretty much come in to help you at the end of the day. And I think that's just a really cool and awesome thing to get here in the moment. And also, going through with all of that, we learned a whole idea of what these scrolls mean, and also, if there was a spare scroll and Kasen was here in charge of the Kabanabi HQ, it really makes sense that he would have the power to pretty much say, nope, we're going to go through, change all of that, and pretty much make it so, well, yeah, there's another one in the Hishaku, pretty much, right? Now, the very first time I read this chapter, my initial prediction was like, hey, it is obviously Dale, the strongest Hishaku member. He is the one, like, right after they talk about this whole vessel thing, we cut to him, and it's like, hey, Yura will be king, and that's pretty much what he proclaims here in the moment, right? And while I still do believe that it is him, like, I don't think there'd be any other reason to give it to any of these other characters. Like, it seems like it would be his big thing, and there's a reason that he wants Yura to be king, and not to mention Yura's whole thing here a few pages later of just saying that he will bring order to this nation, which is like, hey, this seems like it should be a really big thing that's also thrown in the middle of this bigger conflict of who is the vessel, pretty much, right? Now, my initial idea, of course, is like, hey, it's Dale, he's obviously the vessel, but if there are one more of the Shaku members who I think it could be, I would probably give that role to Hokuto. Of course, we have seen that he's currently dipped out of the battle, of course, where Iruha, Natsuki, and Izami are all getting ready to go through and beat the ever-loving crap out of Yura. So he has escaped from there. So maybe the reason he has escaped is because he is the vessel, or maybe he is simply just going to protect the vessel because we know he is an incredibly powerful force, one that killed Ibuki Masaka all by himself, while also assisting in the assassination of Kunishige Rokuhira, right? There's legitimately just so much to think about with this chapter of Kagurabachi, and I still think it's Dale, but to be honest with you, it could also be Hokuto, but I'm pretty much leaning all my stocks into Dale here in the moment. But yeah, overall, this chapter is just a really, really fun one. I love seeing more of Izami pretty much getting his conviction to beat the crap out of Yura. I love learning all these things about the vessels and like, hey, maybe my left tendon is gone because, or not, tendon isn't really a vital organ. Like, who knows, maybe my, like, my left ventricle of my heart has suddenly disappeared or whatever it is, right? But all of that being said, just a good old chapter of Kagurabachi. And I can't wait to see where we go next time in this wonderful story. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 97, I have covered plenty of other Kagurabachi chapters in the past. There'll be a playlist of all my other Kagurabachi videos linked in the description box of this video, along with the end card of this video as well. And like, hey, if you enjoyed this video and enjoy my other Kagurabachi content, maybe you won't mind checking out the rest of the content I make on my channel. Mainly, I know I'm really behind on a lot of series right now, but college is getting busy. I've been out of town. I have to go home for weekends. Just like, my life's getting busy now, which doesn't always mean that I can easily sit down and make all of these YouTube videos that I would love to, right? But go check all of my other content now at Glowplasma, or just like click on my icon down here under this video. But yeah, with all that out of the way, I will catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 98. And when that chapter hits, we're going to be 2 away from 100. That's absolutely insane, man, right? With all that being said, this was chapter number 97, again titled Vessel. And I will see you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma, signing out.